Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. A federal judge says mail-in ballots postmarked by Election Day and received by November 13th must be counted. This week's ruling overturns an Indiana law that required all mail-in ballots to be received by noon on Election Day in order to be counted. The ruling comes in a lawsuit filed by Common Cause and the NAACP, which argues that thousands of people voting by mail because of the coronavirus risk having their ballots not counted because of slow mail delivery and other factors outside their control. With Hoosiers statewide requesting mail-in ballots in record numbers, reporter Mitch Legan spoke with Monroe County's election supervisor to see how she's preparing for the November election.
Everybody's got a red pen.
As the county election supervisor, Karen Wheeler's #1 job is ensuring Monroe County's elections go smoothly. But 2020 has spared no one, and she now has to deal with a global pandemic and an influx of mail-in ballots in the lead up to an exceedingly contentious presidential election.
8,800 ballots went out on Saturday, and today and yesterday we processed probably 650 more. And we'll have more today. We haven't gotten our mail. So the numbers will go up.
For context, the 2016 election saw 3,300 mail-in ballot requests. The county's more than tripled that, and there's still about a month to go until the deadline for requesting absentee ballots. Diane Locke is one person who will be voting absentee this election. She'll be out of town November 3rd and says voting by mail is just more convenient than voting early, especially when you take COVID into consideration.
I've seen other states have the long lines in our primary, and it wasn't pleasant for people, with or without COVID. So long lines sound terrible.
Wheeler says the increased workload has added stress at Election Central, but voters shouldn't be concerned about the county's ability to handle the increased workload. The primaries earlier this year worked as a test run of sorts.
I had 23,000 applications. That just blew our socks off, because coming off of 3,300 to 23,000, it was astronomical of trying to get the process down and to get those ballots out the door.
Everyone who wanted an absentee ballot got one, thanks in part to the state lifting restrictions on why people could request one. But Indiana is one of a handful of states that requires an excuse for voting absentee, and those restrictions are back in for the general election. Wheeler says even though a reason is necessary, the excuses provided should cover people, even if the coronavirus isn't one of them.
So if I get yours, Mitch, and I see that you've marked that, I just accept it. I don't question it. We pretty much take face value what you tell us, and it's not we're not the voter registration police or excuse police. We take what you say because it's a legal document.
And she says while concerns about voter fraud are legitimate, especially with mail-in voting, they're largely overblown. Election workers have about a 20-step process just to get a ballot to your door, and then have another dozen steps to confirm your ballot's legitimate when you turn it back in.
I think we do an excellent job. It is possible for a person to get 2 ballots. I will say that. It's very rare, and it has happened in the past, but they will not both count.
Frankly, it's not a very smart crime to try to commit. There's a paper record to track back to somebody. Most of the attempts at fraud, though, are caught because you have that record, and particularly with mail voting, it's very easy to track back to because there is that paper trail to track back to anybody that might attempt to commit frauds.
While Wheeler expects absentee requests to continue coming in, she's also bracing for increased numbers of people physically going to the polls.
And I have others that definitely want to vote early voting, and there's those that they definitely want to come on Election Day. And I find that very interesting, that it's not everybody wants a mail ballot. There's certain ones that want to do it the way they've done it before, and this is how they feel comfortable.
Early voting will start October 6th and last until November 2nd. If you're going to vote in person, polling places will have enhanced safety protocols, including disinfecting voting stations, mandatory masks, and keeping voters properly distanced. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Mitch Legan.
President Trump's attacks on the integrity of mail-in voting and on the election itself have raised questions about whether the president will accept the results. IU professor Leslie Lenkowski is an expert on civic engagement and has been hosting a series of campaign discussions. He's with us now. Professor Lenkowski, how will the diagnosis that the president has just received that he has the coronavirus affect the election?
Well, I think the president would probably have liked to focus on other issues besides his handling of coronavirus. Most polls indicate a majority of Americans don't think he's doing very well on that. Now that he himself and his wife have the virus, it's going to be very difficult for him to avoid this issue. To the extent he'd like to, may even restrict his ability to go out campaigning, which is another part of his strategy.
Now, the president may win the election, but what happens if he loses and refuses to cede the office?
Well, there are a lot of steps before that's going to happen, a lot of ifs built into that. But the key thing to remember is on January 20th, if Donald Trump insists that he still wants to stay in the White House, the president at the time, a person named Nancy Pelosi under our Constitution, who becomes president if there's not a duly elected president, will undoubtedly serve an eviction notice.
We're used to receiving most results on election night itself. How different do you expect the counting to be this year because of the very large increase in mail-in voting?
Not a lot. I think it's important to remember that many states, including Indiana, are already processing in one way or another the mail-in votes. It's going to continue. And while there will undoubtedly be votes coming in after Election Day, it's probably going to be a relatively small portion of the total. We also know that when we look at votes as they're being counted, we pay attention, at least the people looking at elections, pay attention to key precincts and get a sense as to what the differences are. 4 years ago, when I was on WTIU election night, at about 9:15, I said that it looked like it was going to be a good night for Donald Trump. And the reason I thought that was the case was because, A, he was doing better than expected in Indiana, and B, we were beginning to get results from Wayne County, Detroit. And Mrs. Clinton was running well behind Senator Obama on that.
We just have a few seconds left. I wonder if you're concerned about post-election violence.
I think that is a concern. About 1 in 3 Americans of both parties now feel that a certain amount of violence is justified. We've normalized this, and it goes before Donald Trump. Remember the movements to occupy Bloomington and other places. I think it's a real danger. I wish it weren't going to occur, but hopefully we will have sufficient law enforcement.
Thanks for sharing your perspective with us. Professor Lenkowski is a professor in the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs at IU.